And hello, everyone. Today is August the 15th, 2025. Most of you have heard that President Trump is meeting with Vladimir Putin of Alaska. They're in Alaska right now, and I just wanted to show it. I want to show them in their talk. So basically, President Trump did arrive in Anchorage, Alaska this morning, and he was surrounded by F-22s and B-2 stealth bombers overhead. Included in the meeting, besides President Vladimir Putin of Russia, we also have Marco Rubio, U.S. Secretary of State, and Steve Witkoff, U.S. Special Envoy. There were many others present, of course. They did arrive on a red carpet labeled Alaska 2025, stretching across the tarmac. I do have a few pictures that I did put up on my X account and my Facebook account. But President Trump did arrive there at 10:22 a.m. and Putin landed around 10:55 a.m. They did emerge. They engaged in a firm handshake. They posed for photos, which I have some pictures of that as well. And then President Putin got into Trump's the Beast, and they drove away. So they're having a closed-door summit in some secured location. The leaders and aides are holding a closed-door discussion that stretches over 2.5 hours so far. Their focus is to achieve a ceasefire, of course, in Ukraine, economic incentives, possible territorial swaps, arms control, NATO non-expansion, and sanctions relief. What's at stake? Trump has pledged to push for an immediate ceasefire. We all know that he is over there trying to make peace over there with, Putin, but he denies negotiating Ukraine's territory, stressing Ukraine must participate in any peace plan. President Trump is hinting at economic cooperation with Russia contingent upon this peace and some other things. Let's see. Trump floated the idea of a future trilateral meeting, which I thought this was going to happen today, that we were going to see Zelensky there as well. So let me take you over to a couple pictures. I was kind of posting this one saying, so they were, let's make sure this is on screen here. I want to show this really big here. When I saw President Trump come down, the steps, not falling down the steps like we've seen with Biden, walk down the steps with ease. And he finally made it up there. And I said he did like an extra, shake, just because of all the BS we've been through with that Russian collusion crap. But it was very cordial. I could tell everything's going well. Despite what the media is going to do and say and spin this. That's why I want to make sure to show these pictures. There they are walking along each side, each other, aside one another. And then, of course, Trump patting his hand as an extra handshake here, which I love seeing. It just shows, who Trump is. He's a peacemaker. And there they are just posing for the camera for pictures. And then here is the whole way it looked. Super duper cool. And sorry, I don't have that queued up for you to see. But I will be bringing you over to the meeting. Let me just bring this over because they are doing, they're waiting. They're supposed to come out any moment. So I'm going to bring this over to Fox and let you see their discussion, their commentary. And plus it's a packed room. This is a very packed room. They keep showing that. There's a lot of chat going on. And, it's Friday. So we're heading into the weekend with this big news breaking here. And I don't know, if it's going to be a long time before he comes out, but I wanted to get this kicked off so that we can hear this discussion behind closed doors. And plus, Trump could be coming out any second, and we're going to learn what happened. So I am going to have my comments turned on, and we're going to
The other one he could talk to would be, Xi in China. I think that would not work out too well. And then, of course, Kim Jong-un, I think that would be a complete waste of time to talk to Kim Jong-un about anything. But talking to Lukashenko, he might be able to give him some sort of assessment as to what was going on. And I think, President Trump likes to, as he said, this is a kind of an interesting term, a feel-out session. And so he was trying to feel out things before he actually landed in Alaska.
What about our European allies? There's some reporting out there to suggest President Trump may be on the phone with them and the Ukrainian side as we speak. We'll wait for more confirmation on that. I would imagine they're going to be watching this live, but they will be getting their own readouts.
Mm-hmm. I think they will. And actually, that is a very good sign. The fact that he's on the phone with our European allies. I would imagine the big three he's talking to, would obviously be, Starmer, Macron, Merkel over in Germany, and then, of course, President Zelensky. But there might be some sort of breakthrough here. There might be something substantial. We're going to know soon enough if there is. But the fact that he's on the phone with them, I'm going to stay hopeful, and I'm hoping he's sharing with them something that was very positive that came out of the meeting.
Now, if there is a breakthrough, the question is, will Ukraine accept that? All right, we do have the photographers getting ready. Okay, Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, now in the room here. Okay, so he was obviously one of the three in the Russian delegation. So you see there more of the delegation coming into the front row here. Let's take this full head on. You see James Blair, White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Susie Wiles, White House Chief of Staff. All right, so it does look like they are readying this press conference. You also see Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent on hand, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, Pete Hegseth, the Defense Secretary, also Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, and let's see here, trying to recognize Caroline Leavitt there, the White House Press Secretary. So all parties from the U.S. side, Hal, are now in the room, except, of course, the principal himself, President Trump. So we wait for Trump and Putin. It looks like this is happening imminently here. Hal Kemper, stay on the line. We're chatting with you on the very back end once the press conference wraps. We thank you so much, Andrew Kraft, back here in the anchor chair as we are watching now for President Trump, for Vladimir Putin to begin their joint press conference in Anchorage, Alaska. So this is almost happening. The moment we've been waiting for, obviously the moment you see there. Okay, Secretary of State Rubio, Steve Witkoff, remember they were in the room with President Trump. It was 3-on-3. We know it lasted nearly 3 hours. And you see there Secretary of State Rubio kind of hamming it up for the cameras. And so now we wait for President Trump, Vladimir Putin. This is happening imminently at any moment. Let's listen in. Okay, so this is, like I said, it's happening at any moment, where we will let you watch uninterrupted the entire press conference there in Anchorage, Alaska. Remember, this all came together in a 1 week's time. We brought you the news 1 week ago today, last Friday, that this was happening now today, this Friday. So somewhat hastily arranged. But to Hal Kemper's point, is there a breakthrough? That is the question. What has been agreed upon, if anything? And if anything, will the Ukrainians agree to that? Remember, they're the other party in this war. Though they may not be there in person right now, they will be getting a readout. The fate of their country hangs in the balance as they continue to face Russian attacks and Russian aggression here. So those two words there, smack dab in the middle, pursuing peace, only two words, a simple statement. Not all that easy, as so many who have tried.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States of America and the President of the Russian Federation.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, Our negotiations have been held in a constructive atmosphere of mutual respect. We have very thorough negotiations that were quite useful. I would like to thank once again my American counterpart for the proposal to travel out here to Alaska. It only makes sense that we've met here because our countries, though separated by the oceans, are close neighbors. So when we've met, when I came out of the plane and I've said, "Good afternoon, dear neighbor. Very good to see you. In good health and to see you alive." I think that is very neighborly. And I think that's some kind words that we can say to each other. We're separated by the Strait of Bering, though there are 2 islands only between the Russian island and the U.S. island. They're only 4 kilometers apart. We're close neighbors, and it's a fact. It's also important that Alaska has to do with our common heritage, common history between Russia and the U.S., and many positive events have to do with that territory. Still, there is tremendous cultural heritage back from the Russian America. For example, Orthodox churches and a lot of more than 700 geographical names of Russian origin. During the Second World War, it was here in Alaska that was the origin of the legendary air bridge for the supply of military aircraft and other equipment under the Lend-Lease program. It was a dangerous and treacherous route over the vast emptiness of ice. However, the pilots of both countries did everything to bring closer the victory. They risked their lives and they gave it all for the common victory. I was just in the city of Magadan in Russia, and there is a memorial there dedicated to the Russian and the U.S. pilots. And there are 2 flags, the U.S. flag and the Russian flag. And I know that here as well, there is such a memorial. There is a military burial place several kilometers away from here. The Soviet pilots are buried there who died during that dangerous mission. We're thankful to the citizens and the government of the U.S. for carefully taking care of their memory. I think that's very worthy and noble. We'll always remember other historical examples when our countries defeated common enemies together in the spirit of battle camaraderie and allyship that supported each other and facilitated each other. I'm sure that this heritage will help us rebuild and foster mutually beneficial and equal ties at this new stage, even during the hardest conditions. It is known that there have been no summits between Russia and the U.S. for 4 years, and that's a long time. This time was very hard for bilateral relations, and let's be frank, they've fallen to the lowest point since the Cold War. I think that's not benefiting our countries and the world as a whole. It is apparent that sooner or later we have to amend the situation to move on from the confrontation to dialogue. And in this case, a personal meeting between the heads of state has been long overdue. Naturally, under the condition of serious and painstaking work, and this work has been done in general. Me and President Trump have very good direct contact. We've spoken multiple times. We spoke frankly on the phone. And special envoy of the president, Mr. Witkoff, traveled out to Russia several times. Our advisors and heads of foreign ministries kept in touch all the time. And you know fully well that one of the central issues was the situation around Ukraine. We see the strive of the administration and President Trump personally to help facilitate the resolution of the Ukrainian conflict. And his strive to get to the crux of the matter, to understand this history, is precious. As I've said, the situation in Ukraine has to do with fundamental threats to our security. Moreover, we've always considered the Ukrainian nation, and I've said it multiple times, a brotherly nation, however strange it may sound in these conditions. We have the same roots, and everything that's happening is a tragedy for us and terrible wound. Therefore, the country is sincerely interested in putting an end to it. At the same time, we're convinced that in order to make the settlement lasting and long-term, we need to eliminate all the primary roots the primary causes of that conflict, and we've said it multiple times, to consider all legitimate concerns of Russia and to reinstate a just balance of security in Europe and in the world on the whole. And I agree with President Trump, as he has said today, that naturally the security of Ukraine should be ensured as well. Naturally, we are prepared to work on that. I would like to hope that the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring closer that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine. We expect that Kiev and European capitals will perceive that constructively and that they won't throw a wrench in the works. They will not make any attempts to use some backroom dealings to conduct provocations to torpedo the nascent progress. Incidentally, when the new administration came to power, bilateral trade started to grow. It's still very symbolic. Still, we have a growth of 20%. As I've said, we have a lot of dimensions for joint work. It is clear that the U.S. and Russian investment and business cooperation has tremendous potential. Russia and the U.S. can offer each other so much in trade, digital, high-tech, and in space exploration. We see that Arctic cooperation is also very possible, and our international context, for example, between the Far East of Russia and the West Coast of the U.S. Overall, it's very important for our countries to turn the page, to go back to cooperation. It is symbolic that not far away from here, the border between Russia and the U.S., there is a so-called international date line. I think you can step over, literally, from yesterday into tomorrow. And I hope we'll succeed in that, in political sphere. I would like to thank President Trump for our joint work, for the well-wishing and trustworthy tone of our conversation. It's important that both sides are result-oriented, and we see that the President of the U.S. has a very clear idea of what he would like to achieve. He sincerely cares about prosperity of his nation. Still, he understands that Russia has its own national interests. I expect that today's agreements will be the starting point, not only for the solution of the Ukrainian issue, but also will help us bring back business-like and pragmatic relations between Russia and the U.S. And in the end, I would like to add one more thing. I'd like to remind you that in 2022, during the last contact with the previous administration, I tried to convince my previous American colleague that the situation should not be brought to the point of no return when it would come to hostilities. And I said it quite directly back then, that it's a big mistake. Today, when President Trump is saying that if he was the president back then, there will be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be so. I can confirm that. I think that overall, me and President Trump have built a very good business-like and trustworthy contact. And I have every reason to believe that moving down this path, we can come, and the sooner the better, to the end of the conflict in Ukraine. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. President. That was very profound. And I will say that I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate. And I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them. They're going to have to agree with what Marco and Steve and some of the great people from the Trump administration who've come here, Scott and John Radcliffe. Thank you very much. But we have some of our really great leaders. They've been doing a phenomenal job. We also have some tremendous Russian business representatives here. And I think, everybody wants to deal with us. We've become the hottest country anywhere in the world in a very short period of time. And we look forward to that. We look forward to dealing. We're going to try and get this over with. We really made some great progress today. I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir. We had many tough meetings, good meetings. We were interfered with by the Russia hoax that made it a little bit tougher to deal with, but he understood it. I think he's probably seen things like that during the course of his career. He's seen it all, but we had to put up with the Russia hoax. He knew it was a hoax, and I knew it was a hoax, but what was done was very criminal. But it made it harder for us to deal as a country in terms of the business and all of the things that we'd like to have dealt with. But we'll have a good chance when this is over. So just to put it very quickly, I'm going to start making a few phone calls and tell them what happened. But we had an extremely productive meeting, and many points were agreed to. There are just a very few that are left. Some are not that significant. One is probably the most significant, but we have a very good chance of getting there. We didn't get there, but we have a very good chance of getting there. I would like to thank President Putin and his entire team, whose faces, who I know in many cases, other than that, whose faces I get to see all the time in the newspapers. You're almost as famous as the boss, but especially this one right over here. But we had some good meetings over the years, right? Good, productive meetings over the years, and we hope to have that in the future. But let's do the most productive one right now. We're going to stop really 5, 6, 7,000, thousands of people a week from being killed, and President Putin wants to see that as much as I do. So, again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
And next time in Moscow.
Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know. I'll get a little heat on that one, but I could see it possibly happening. Thank you very much, Vladimir. And thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay, wow. So this is what we just watched there, statements from Trump and Putin. Putin speaking first. No questions taken by reporters gathered there in the summit venue in Anchorage. So this was not expected in any joint press conference setting. You anticipate, you expect the principals, the leaders on hand will take questions from the press. They did not just do that here. President Trump saying that the meetings were productive, some things were agreed to, but not the thing that they came for. Putin saying that the conversations were productive here. So in the meantime, we do have to get into more of these conversations here because this is quite something. Let's go back out live to our vantage point there. And we have Hal Kempfer still standing by here. We're going to bring him into the conversation in just a moment. But in the meantime, like I said, this was not expected. This was very, very surprising. Hal Kempfer joining us right now again. Hal, your initial thoughts. I don't think anyone expected this. I'm still struck by the fact that it ended that abruptly. Remember, we were told this was going to be happening in about 30 minutes time. It was moved up. You were speaking on the fact that presumably it was moved up because there was some progress. There was some good signs being made. What did you hear from Putin and Trump? And why did Putin get to speak first, Hal?
That actually surprised me, Andrew. I think the reason that Putin spoke first is because we heard a lot of flattering. We heard a lot of, broad comments, talking about Lend-Lease in World War II, or the support for Russia with the U.S. and that we once were allies in the war, against the Axis powers. And what I heard was a lot of, I'm going to just say very flowery language coming out of Putin. And it kind of let me scratch my head, which is, why is he doing this? And as I kept listening to Putin, I wasn't hearing a lot of substance. I wasn't hearing, key points. I really didn't hear the outline of an agreement to speak of. And then he was done. And, President Trump said his stuff. And again, he said there was agreement on some parts. I am hoping that we're going to get some sort of communique or something that gives us a kind of clearer idea of what they actually agreed to? Because frankly, from the speech.
Okay, so basically, I was, tracking along with everything that I could, and I had to wonder, why did they let President Putin go first? Why did he speak first? That was actually something I thought of. And so someone from YouTube writes, all theater, lights, camera, action. Thank you for your comment. I actually have to say it sort of looked like that. So I was expecting for them to talk about this ceasefire, in Ukraine, and the whole name of the summit is Pursuing Peace. And the fact that really these two met and it was so cordial, and you saw the way they, President Trump handled walking so, right beside him, Putin, when they came up the red carpet, and just the shaking of the hands. And they looked like they were happy. Like it didn't look tense to me. It looked like a couple of friends. I mean, I'm reading into this as well. And so we learned that, I saw Putin was thanking President Trump, which is nice. And then he said there's a possibility of having business between Russia and the U.S. So it looks like they're discussing trade deals, and agrees with Trump. This was a big thing, that if President Trump had been in office the past, 4 years, there would be no war. So if Trump had been president, he actually made that statement and agreed with him. It was a little difficult because they had someone interpreting, and many people said that Putin does speak English, but if he were to mess up any word, then it would make the headlines. And so they just went that route to, be safe, and that's pretty smart. When President Trump did come out and speak, he spoke a lot less than, Putin. It's probably because we didn't have the interpreter going on, but he did say, we made headway. He didn't say we struck a deal. There's going to be ceasefire. We didn't hear any solid agreement, except for Zelensky is going to be getting a call from President Trump, and he is President Trump also made sure to talk about how he's looking forward to business deals with Russia. It looks like we will be trading, and you're going to see that. So he did take the time, which I thought is so necessary, to call out the Russia collusion hoax, just like he called it. I mean, when they were meeting on the red carpet, I noticed Trump did an extra layer of the, handshake. I showed this picture, and he was probably like, I'm sorry for the BS we put you through, that the United States put your country through with this Russia BS situation for all those years. I mean, like 10 years. Okay. And so ridiculous. Now, one thing I thought was hilarious is when Trump was talking about all the familiar faces in the room, along with, Putin and everything, and he was calling him the boss. I know that's going to stick. So a surprise ending to this whole quick meeting that was just a few minutes, really, would have been live for, almost 30 minutes, because it took a while for them to come out, that Putin actually invited President Trump to Moscow on his next meeting. And you could tell that Trump was surprised by this. And he was like a little taken back. I don't think he expected that at all. And what the moderators here on Fox are talking about is that the press were all in there in the room, and they did not take one question. They didn't take any questions on Guinea either, I don't think. So they got nothing except for a big nothing, except what I just told you about. And so a lot of the chat is kind of hilarious that I'm looking at, on the channel. And I don't know if you can see the chat when you end this. A lot of people are basically saying a lot of things where nothing happened. And so they're joking and saying, no, there's going to be sanctions. There's a party in Moscow. We'll see you there. It's So I don't know. They're saying that Putin only came for the baked Alaska. People have such a funny imagination here. And somebody out there is really giving a lot of respect to President Putin. And so just trying to see. So I don't know. We got nothing. Thank you, Russia. Well, thanks for, them two coming together and having this peaceful meeting. We don't really know what happened behind closed doors right now, but we will find out. And that's all I have. That's all I have for you. So God bless y'all. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great weekend. I'll be back soon. Let me know what you think here. I'll see you guys later.